I want to talk to you a little bit more now about the Lincoln miracle, because I'll just have a quick drink if I can. Because over the last few years, an incredible miracle, not just miracle, but miracles have been taking place in our city as relating to the Jews. I'll give you a bit of background information. Lincoln is a very ancient city. In medieval times, it was second, if it was second, it was second only to London. And it has 3 of the remaining 5 Jewish properties left that are over 900 years old. And this one is called Jews' House. It's adjacent, I haven't got it on here, to Jews' Court. Incredibly robust buildings of the Jews in our city. But I'll give you a bit of an example. What were the Jews doing in Lincoln, in England? Well, in 1066, you'll know your history, when William the Conqueror came over. He was French, and he didn't trust the Brits, because he was at war with them, wasn't he? They wouldn't give him the crown. So to actually collect taxes, he brought over Jews from France, from Rouen, from northern France, and he brought them over to be his collectors of taxes, and they had an honoured position. They were representatives of the king, a bit like today's tax collectors, but they were representatives of the king, and they had rights of freedom of movement throughout the country. They had the right to claim sanctuary in the king's castles if they are under any threat, physical threat, which they did in York, if you know the story of the York Jews, where they took refuge in Clifford's Tower. So they were given, but they also set up this. There was one Jew in particular, Aaron of Lincoln. They said that he was probably the richest Jew probably in the known world then. He had, because of his tax collecting systems, he set up the world's first banking system in Lincoln. And the amount of coinage, these buildings wouldn't have had a downstairs. There'd be no windows. There'd be a steps to go up. That would be the living quarters, and the downstairs would be receptacles, possibly along with the castle and the cathedral in Lincoln, for storing the coins and the documents of loans that were given by the Jews to the British, to the barons, to the judiciary, to the society. In one of the houses in Lincoln, they believe that Aaron held in coinage enough coins equal to the annual income of the crown of England. It's just amazing. And when a shipment of these coins were actually sent to northern France, they reckon there's about 10 tons of coins, of silver coins that went. It actually was shipwrecked, so somewhere between, I think it was Shoreham or somewhere, and France, there's a shipwreck full of 10 tons of coins anyway. So the Jews flourished and they prospered, but not only did the Jews flourish and prosper by their buildings, the nation prospered as well, because they provided the capital for many of the ecclesiastical buildings we see around our country. You know, they contributed to, like, Peterborough Cathedral, many of the Westminster Abbey, Lincoln Cathedral was built and extended massively through loans, and they're still here today. So we have a blessing of the Jews still across our nation. Even the king took loans from the Jews, which sounds incredible, doesn't it? And they say they had an elevated position in society. And they had their own court. The building next to this was called Jews' Court, because Jews were not subject to Christian law. They could be subject to their own Hebrew law, hence their own court. And Lincoln was so important because it had one of the chief rabbis here as well, who lived here, Barakiah of Lincoln. Well, it came in 1255 that the chief rabbi's daughter was getting married, so the Jews came from all over Lincoln for a wedding. But at the same time, a Christian boy was found dead in a well. And the Jews were accused then of killing this boy and throwing the body in a well. The the king then came down to Lincoln, and he ordered the immediate execution of one of the Jews of Lincoln. He then rounded up all the Jews who come for a wedding, sent a group of them down to London, executed about 20 of them in London as well. He did this because he wanted the money, he wanted their property. There was no evidence for this except just hearsay. You know, we had this blood libel. We know from history that Jews are accused of killing children, but this blood libel was laid against the Jews, and they were summarily executed. The first Jew of Lincoln was executed by being dragged right through the streets, through the tail of a horse, and then hung up on a hill, just done in the city. So the king then seized all their property, because he could legally then seize their property and the money that he needed for all his exploits. But also, the cathedral church grew very wealthy as well, because now they had a martyr. In medieval England, a martyr, the only other martyr comparable was in Canterbury. So they had a martyr, they took the body and put a big shrine in Lincoln Cathedral and charged a lot of money for people to visit the shrine, and so made money. So it was a brutal murder, a collusion with Henry VIII, who was the king, and then Henry's son, Edward I, in 1290, expelled all the Jews from our land. And a curse came over our land. You know, we were incredibly prosperous in the Middle Ages. There was this massive ecclesiastical building program, and it all stopped. Everything stopped. There was no capital for anything else. Lincoln itself declined. Lincoln in 1255, its administrative area was from the south bank of the River Humber, to the north bank of the Thames. It was huge. And people now say, Lincoln? Where's that? But this story I'm going to tell you is about a reversal of the curse, because the scripture says, I'll bless those who bless you and I'll curse those who curse you. In 2020, my church, we dedicated a house of prayer. And I was on the steering committee for that. And I made this proposal. I said, well, if we're dedicating our building for a house of prayer, let's make this house of prayer the first prayer meeting for a nation, because it says, my house shall be a house of prayer for all nations. The first nation we should pray for is Israel. So I invited the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem to come and hold a prayer meeting for Israel in the city of Lincoln, which had the biggest root of anti-Semitism in the whole of England. A prayer meeting that hadn't taken place in the history of Lincoln since 1255, and certainly not after 1290. So I was asked to provide a history, do a section of the history of the Jews of Lincoln, which I did. And one of the things that came out of that was there is no memorial at all in the city of Lincoln for the Jews that were brutally murdered on the orders of the king and in collusion with the church. Though the cathedral had got very rich by putting a shrine, they built an elaborate shrine inside the cathedral, but that shrine was destroyed by Oliver Cromwell in the 1600s in the Civil War, leaving only the base. But from that time, the cathedral installed a plaque next to the shrine in Lincoln Cathedral. You can miss it. That's it. and as I presented this presentation on the Jews of Lincoln, part of it was I said, there's no memorial to the Jews of Lincoln. After that prayer meeting, which was a full day, Christians in Lincoln, Christians who attended there, and there was a rabbi, he's a leader of Lincoln Jewish Meeting, came to me and said, will you start pushing forward? Will you for a memorial? And it really laid on my heart. God laid on my heart, yes, we need something that will speak And I was reminded of when Jesus was on the triumphant entry into Jerusalem. He says, if the people are quiet, because the leaders were saying to him, tell the people to keep quiet, tell the children to pipe down. He said, if they're quiet, even the stones will cry out. And it really came into my heart, let's have a stone memorial in Lincoln that will cry out after 800 years of silence, because nobody was speaking out for the Jews. Nobody was speaking out for memorial. So I was tasked with commissioning this memorial. Three miracles we needed. Had no money, no design, and no location for it to go to. But we believe that this stone, this memorial, would reverse the curse over first of our city and over our land. My job at the time, I was a quarry inspector, and I knew that the Lincoln Cathedral had its own quarry in the city centre, and I was overseeing, in a regulatory role, the closure of this quarry, making sure it's closed and restored to its how it should be. So I approached the staff in the cathedral, and I said, will you, from the stones in your quarry, why not let the last stone have the last word on this affair? And you can then put it in your cathedral, you can put it in your grounds, and promote this stone, dedicate it to the Jews. Let the last stones from the last quarry have the last word. Unfortunately, we didn't get a positive reply to that. So for 2 years, we had no memorial. And I liaised with the leader of the Lincoln Jewish Minyan, and I said, something in my heart says, I'm sorry, but I can't let this go. I know the doors are all shut, but I can't let it go. There's something in my heart that says, this is so birthed in me, I can't let it go. And it became like my passion to see it. But 2 years later, I got I manage all the complaints that come in about things going wrong in quarries all over the county. We've got a big county. We've probably got about nearly 300 mineral sites. And it says, you need to visit this quarry. So, okay. So I set up a meeting with the owner of the quarry. And there was nothing wrong with the quarry, I hasten to add, at all. When I visited him when I did in, I think it's 2022, January 2022. And when I was speaking to the owner, a guy called Phil Kerry, I asked him, what projects is his quarry working on? He produces high quality stone to go all over the world, all over England as well, even for restoring broken brick stonework like at Cambridge University buildings, Westminster Abbey. And so I said, what other projects are you on? He said, well, we've just prepared a lot of building stone for a synagogue and a Jewish school in London. And of course I thought, oh, that's interesting. And the week we spoke was the week of Holocaust Memorial. So we got chatting about Holocaust Memorial, and I took the bull by the horn and said, well, did you know we had a Holocaust in Lincoln in 1255? And he was really interested. He says, tell me about it. So I told him about it. And then I did the whole history about the Jews of Lincoln. This is while I'm working. Was paid to do that job. This is great. I'm being paid to do what I love doing. And he says, Timmy says, I'll provide a memorial. He says, come and talk to my designers now. And I said, well, hang on, Phil. I said, we've no money. And he says, I'll fund it. He says, I'll just fund it. And I knew stonework, especially cut stonework, does not come cheap. But he says, no, he said, and he says, well, anyway, come speak to my designers. And I said, Phil, I don't even have a design. So he said, well, come back to me when you've got a design. So I drove out of his quarry thinking, what happened then? God's in this. God's really in this. To suddenly from nothing to be directed to speak to somebody I didn't even know had a heart for Israel, and he just came out with blue and said, I will do it. So I said, I will come back to you. A couple of months after that, I went on a tour to Israel, and I visited on the shores of Galilee. In 2009, they'd excavated for a hotel visitor centre. But in their excavations, they found the site of the synagogue of Magdalene, where Mary Magdala was from. And it said Jesus would have spoken in all the synagogues in Galilee. And right in the centre that they found, close to the centre, was a carved stone with images of the Second Temple before the Romans destroyed the temple in AD 70. So you had pictures of the menorah, the jars of oil on the faces, the cartwheels of Ezekiel, the showbread cut into the top of it, possibly shofars and other things that all the arches of the cloisters, the hanging Herodian oil lamps. And I looked at it and I thought, that's beautiful. It was just stunning. And I thought, well, Jesus himself probably would have seen that when he was there, because it was there at the time. And he was at Magdala in the synagogues, thought, wow. And then that verse came to me, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its cunning, if I do not remember thee. And I thought, wow, that reminds people of Jerusalem. It's a memorial. And I was so taken up with just thinking of this stone, beautiful stone in a synagogue in the northern Galilee, to remind people of their destiny of Jerusalem. And I lay in bed that night going, wow. Suddenly, why don't you use that as your memorial for Lincoln? I thought, oh my days. It just dropped. I thought, that would be a most beautiful memorial. Because in a city, to have a stone that speaks of Jerusalem reminds the Jews of Jerusalem and reminds Christians of Jerusalem in this time where we need to be reminded of God's calling and purpose for God's people, and what better centre than Jerusalem. I thought, this would be an amazing memorial. So as soon as I got home, Phil, I've got a design. He goes, yeah, what is it? And I sent him, I said, I'll send you the photographs. So I sent him the photographs, and I said, can you do it, Phil? When I called him up, I said, can you do this? And he goes, no, I can't. He says, it's too complicated. He says, we do building stone, we do really good quality building stone and architectural stone with motifs and columns and stuff like that. He said, but it's really off, it's in another league, he said. And he goes, but, and I love the buts of God. He said, I have a workshop in Jaipur in India. I will contract them to source a stone and cut it by hand, just as the original would have been cut by hand. I thought, wow. I mean, I was just going, wow. I'm in another place here. So he instructed it to be cut. There was a prototype that was nearly done, and Phil told them, no, that's done wrong. You've made the sides straight. I want them to be concave as the original is, and you can't change it without doing that. So they had to go and find another stone, and then it was done. They sent the photographs through, and it started its journey from Jaipur in India, and it was going to arrive, I think it was in September or December. Anyway, it was going to arrive at the end of 2024. So this baby was going to be born. It was coming to England, but we had no location for it. Because of my work, I had contacted my colleagues in the Lincoln Castle. In the planning department, they did all the planning permissions for anything that went on in the castle. Lincoln Castle, it had the Magna Carta in the castle. So I thought, this would be great. You can't have anything more amazing than this memorial stone in the castle to talk of the Jews of Lincoln. It's so fundamental to the history of the Jews. But my colleague, who sat just a few desks away, said, no, you can't have it in the castle because of planning law this and planning law that. And I thought, okay. She said, there's no link to the Jews in the castle. I said, there is a link. I said, because I had to do a lot of research. I said, in 1190, when Jews all over England were being murdered, Lincoln was the only place, the only city where Jews were not being killed. because the bishop then, Bishop Hugh, took them, who loved the Jews, he took them into the castle, locked the doors where they were safe until the danger was over. And he said, oh no, but we're not allowing any more permanent, because if we did it for you, we'd have to do it for everybody else. So I went knocking on every other door, the galleries, the museums. It was all sorry, no. And I even walked up the hill. We did lots of prayer walks up and down, because Lincoln, you go up a hill. All these Jews, this is a very, very steep hill. You know, you really do need your oxygen mask or your walking boots as you're going up the hill. I even tried to look at buying this little shop. It says to let. I thought, well, we can put it in the window there so people can see it next to the Jews' house. But that was a no-no. But Scripture came to me, you know, that when Jesus and when Joseph and Mary were going to looking for a place for the birth of Jesus, knocking on doors, eventually something opened up. So I had a bit of that. It just kept me going. So the stone came. The Jewish community came around it. We were just in awe of the beauty, the carvings on it. Then the few of us went back into Phil's, the donor's house, and he prepared a lovely, not a meal for us, but there was snacks and coffee, and it had a lovely. And then one of the leaders of the Jewish minion came in. He says, "Have you seen this on the stone?" I said, "No." "Come out, you've got to have a look at this." So we went out to have a look at the stone, and he says, "Look at that on the side of the stone." And running through the grain of the rock on one of the sides is the image of a menorah. Running through the rock. It's there, you can see it. And we all went, oh my gosh, and we thought, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can see 6 branches running through, but where's the 7th? A few days later, Phil came back and he says, "I found the 7th. I said, "How did you find it?" Because we could only see 6. He says, "You have to use a mirror." Phil, what were you doing with the mirror? He says, "Oh, I was just looking underneath it." He says, and then I looked in the mirror and I could see the image of the menorah and I could see the 6th. He said, "It's there." He goes, "Come over and see." So I went over. Yeah, there's 7 branches on the menorah. And I thought, wow. The first prototype Phil rejected. So they had to go and find another rock to carve from. Of all the rocks in all the world, in all of history that were made, they chose a rock that when carved had the image of a menorah running through the whole grain of the rock. I thought, that's the signature of the master craftsman. That's the signature of our God, who before the foundations of the world prepared this stone for such a time as this. It was awesome. So, but then at this meeting, they said, right, we've got the stone, we've got, it's here. Where's it going to go? Tim. I don't know. I've knocked on every door I can think of on the city of Lincoln. And they said, well, have you tried this? Yes. Have you tried the museum? Yes. Have you tried the cathedral? Yes. Have you tried the castle? Yes. Have you tried the art galleries? Yes. Have you tried this? Have you tried everything? Yes, I've tried everything. And that night they said, well, what about the Bomber Command Center? I said, I could try the Bomber Command Center. I said, but what's the link to the Jews of Lincoln? Couldn't see one. So I went to bed, when I went home that night, I didn't have any rest. And then it was like the Spirit of God whispered and said, do a search on the Bomber Command Center. So I went online, did a search. And I found there that, as we've heard from Graham, over 20,000 Jews, British Jews, flew in the RAF or worked with the RAF, and nearly 600 were killed fighting as volunteers in World War II. I thought, that memorial can be for all the Jews, because God doesn't want to restrict the memorial just for one group of Jews. It's the whole community of Jews. So that night I penned a quick email to the chief executive, and the next morning I got a reply, come and see me. This was the next day. So I went in, and 2 days later, come and see me. Went to the meeting, talked about it, and the chief executive says this really fits in with our principles of remembrance, reconciliation. And the chief executive said, and I've chosen a place for it. And she says, let's go and have a look. So we walked down. If you've ever been to the Bomber Command Memorial, it's an incredible place. It's got the names of 52,000+ bomber aircrew who perished in World War II. Even the names of all those Jews who died there as well. And in the center of it, it's got a spinnacle, which is the wingspan from tip to tip of a Lancaster bomber, on the hill overlooking Lincoln on the other side from the cathedral. And when she took me to this place, she said, this is the place that's prepared. And it's in the most prominent place overlooking the city. Like a statement. I thought, wow. I wept because it was just so beautiful. She says, but let's get a team together and we'll arrange for the presentation. So there's the story. There's the menorah on that side. There's the oil jugs. On top here, you've got the showbread arranged in, there's 12 there. Got fishes, because it's Galilee. So you've got loads of fish. You've got the palmate palms, all the palms in the area. The actual ghost menorah, they call it the ghost menorah, that runs through the grain. I think it's on this side, or maybe it's on the other side there. But you can just see the arches. But if you stood here, facing this way, it's as if you're facing Jerusalem. That would be the entrance to the temple, the two main columns of what would be the entrance to the temple before the Romans destroyed it. And this is the location. That's the dedication we had on the 8th of September last year. You can see all the dignitaries from the RAF. You've got the Air Vice Marshal. He's the highest ranking Air Vice Marshal in the RAF, who's Jewish. You've got the mayors, mayoress. You've got the Jewish leaders here. You've got the Air Vice Marshal. Air Chief Marshal. You've got the first, and this gentleman here, who gave the blessing of the stone, he is the first Jewish RAF rabbi since 1947. There's myself there. There's Phil Kerry. There's another leader of the Jews. There's David Elms. There's another mayor, MP, and then the RAF Padre, and another RAF dignitary. They all came out representing. And I thought, this is and people were saying, this is just like a wedding. I thought, wedding? That's what happened in 1255. There was a wedding. And what you don't see in this is a marquee that's absolutely got chandeliers, it's got food in, it's got wine. And people saying, this is just like a wedding. It's incredible. I said, because it's the reversal of the curse. The curse is being reversed. And so you had representative of the king. You also have where's the bishop? We have a bishop there as well. Our Bishop of Grantham who attended. So we had all the representatives. It was like a throwback to 1255, but a reversal of the curse.
More than 100 people gathered recently at the International Bomber Command Centre in Lincoln in the north of England to remember not only the historic Jews of the city, but also the 600 Jews who died flying in the Royal Air Force in World War II. the Lincoln Jewish Memorial Stone was dedicated to remember those who died serving in the war, as well as the many Jews who were imprisoned and executed 800 years ago on false charges. This blood libel and other atrocities eventually led to the expulsion of all Jews from England in 1290. The UK branch of International Christian Embassy Jerusalem played a key part in making this memorial a reality. The UK Director David Elm says it's part of their mandate to care for and build bridges with the Jewish community.
Not only do we want to bring comfort to the Jewish people and honouring them, but we also want to be bridge builders. That's our goal, and we hope from this that we will build stronger bridges and links within the Jewish community.
Stephen Griffiths, leader of the Lincoln Independent Jewish Minyan, says it's very special to be able to remember the many lives sacrificed that had gone unnoticed.
So many people in the public don't realise how many Jewish people took part in the war, volunteered, served in all of the armed forces, and therefore, obviously, so many of them also lost their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice. So to have somewhere that commemorates that, and specifically the Jewish element of that, is a wonderful thing to have.
Tim Collis is Memorial Stone Project co-leader and regional representative of the International Christian Embassy UK branch, and hopes this memorial will have a positive impact for many years to come.
For 800 years over this city we've had silence, we've not had a memorial stone to the Jews who suffered terribly from anti-Semitism. So we pray that this stone will speak its wonderful message of remembrance, reconciliation and hope for many generations to come.
Peter Wooding reporting for the Global News Alliance.
Amazing. And just like the Gibeonites who were murdered, in the Bible we read in Joshua, I think, Joshua 9. They wanted restitution. They wanted something on a hill. And when it was done, the Gibeonites then said, they set what they needed for the reconciliation, because the land had then fallen into a drought and David sought the Lord. Exactly the same happened here. The two Jewish leaders of the Lincoln Jewish Jews both together made a declaration. The blood libel of 1255 has at last been fully recognized and reconciled. Wow. What a reversal of a curse over the city. And I did have, and say we have the leaders of different denominations as well attended. I did have one question. The ancient Jewish quarter in Lincoln is over here. The cathedral, the castle is over here. All the galleries. Why was the door shut? I think there was two answers to that. Because the Jews were memorialized who flew in Bomber Command, wanted to be part of the recognition. God wanted that. But then I found out after this that this site was the hill where the first Jew of Lincoln was hung. We have an amazing God who's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we can ask or think. So I'll leave that with you. Thank you very much for listening. Amen.